Good evening, dear listeners. Welcome back to Insomnia, the quiet place where the day finally lets you go. Settle in now. Pull the blanket a little closer. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears, down into the warmth of the bed. There is nothing left to carry tonight. Whatever the day asked of you, it is finished now. You can set it down. You can let it go. Tonight, we are going somewhere very far away. Not in miles, in time. We are going back through centuries, past the lives of everyone you have ever known, to a warm shore at the edge of an ancient sea, to a city of white stone and salt air, and to the greatest library the world has ever known. Imagine a place that tried to gather every word ever written, every story, every map, every cure, every song. A house built to hold all the knowledge in the world under one long roof beside a quiet harbor. That place was real. People walked its halls and read by its lamplight and loved it. It was called the Library of Alexandria. We will wander through it together, slowly, with nowhere to be. We will meet the kings who dreamed it, and the scholars who lived among its scrolls. We will follow the long, gentle way it rose into wonder, and the longer, quieter way it slipped into memory. There is no hurry here. Nothing tonight will ask you to stay awake. So let your eyes close, if they haven't already. Let your breathing slow and deepen. You do not need to remember any of this. Let the names and the dates wash over you like warm water and simply drift. Imagine the sound of the sea, far off and steady. Imagine warm lamplight, gold against old stone. We are walking toward it now, you and I, down through the years, toward a city that has been waiting a very long time. Notice how the bed holds you. The weight of the blanket, the soft give of the pillow beneath your head, the warmth that has gathered around you, slow and complete. There is nowhere you have to be tonight, and nothing you have to do. Only this, to listen, lightly, and to let go. Each breath a little slower than the one before, each thought a little softer, a little further away, like footsteps fading down a long stone hall. Do not try to follow the path. Just let it carry you. There will be kings and scholars and ships and scrolls and a slow and gentle ending. None of it asks anything of you. You may drift off long before the end, and that is perfectly all right. The story will go on, quietly, around you, the way the sea goes on beyond a sleeping shore. Let us begin. Imagine the coast of Egypt more than 2,000 years ago. A long, low shore where the land runs gently out and the great sea begins. To one side, the desert, pale and endless. To the other, the slow brown mouth of the Nile, spreading its waters toward the blue. And here, between them, a narrow strip of sand, a quiet lagoon, and a small island lying just offshore. There is almost nothing here. A fishing village of a few low huts, the wind, the gulls, the endless patient folding of the waves upon the sand. It is a forgotten place, a place the world has not yet noticed. The fishermen mend their nets and watch the horizon as their fathers did, and their fathers before them. The days are long and warm and much the same. Nothing has ever happened here. Nothing, they would tell you, ever will. And then, one spring, into this quiet place came a young king. His name was Alexander, and he was not yet 30 years old. He had crossed half the known world with his army, and everywhere he went, the old powers crumbled before him. Kingdoms that had stood for centuries simply opened their gates. But he did not come to this shore to fight. There was no enemy here, no city to take. He came here, of all things, to build. They say he stood on this empty beach and saw something that no one else could see. Not the sand and the gulls and the few poor huts, but streets, harbors, white towers catching the morning sun. A great city facing out across the water, gathering the trade of 3 continents into its open arms. Where others saw an empty shore, he saw a crossroads of the world. And so he marked it out himself, then and there. The old story tells us he had no chalk to draw the lines of the city walls, so his builders used barley flour instead, pouring it in long, pale ribbons across the sand. They traced the avenues, the marketplaces, the temples, the line of the harbor walls, the whole shape of a city laid down in soft white grain. And then, the story says, the birds came down from the sky in great clouds and ate the flour away. His advisors grew uneasy at the sight. An omen, they whispered. A bad sign, the city's plan devoured before a single stone was laid. But the priests who traveled with him read it differently. This city, they said, would feed people from every corner of the earth. It would take the whole world in and give back to it in turn. Whether that is true, or only a tale told later by people who already knew what the city would become, no one can say. But it is a gentle thought to hold as you drift. A city traced in grain, eaten by birds, and still, somehow, it rose. Alexander did not stay to see it. He was a restless man, always turning toward the next horizon, and within days he was gone again, marching east, on toward lands he would never come home from. He never saw a single stone of his city laid. He never walked its finished streets, never stood in the shade of its colonnades. He gave it only 2 things, its shape and its name, Alexandria. And then he left it behind, to others and to time. But the place he had chosen was a good one, better, perhaps, than even he had known. The little island offshore was joined to the mainland by a long causeway, and on either side of that causeway, 2 great harbors opened, one for the busy traffic of the sea, one sheltered and calm and still. Ships could come here from Greece, from Syria, from the old cities of the Nile, and always find safe water and a welcoming shore. It was a place made for gathering. Imagine the harbor in those first young years. The smell of cut stone and wet rope and sea salt. The shouts of the builders. The slow creak of cranes lifting blocks of pale limestone into place. Dust hanging gold in the heavy afternoon light. A city rising out of the sand, day by day, street by street, laid out in a great clean grid, the avenues wide enough for the sea breeze to move all the way through, so that even in the heat of Egypt, the city could breathe. And here, in time, 2 worlds met and slowly learned to live together. The Greeks, who came with their language and their gods, and their endless love of argument, and the Egyptians, whose land this had always been, far older than any Greek could imagine. with their own gods and their own long memory of the river and the sun. In the markets they mingled, the smell of fish and warm bread and strange spice, the calls of sellers in a tangle of half a dozen tongues, bright cloth, dark grain, the soft gleam of beaten copper in the sun. Temples rose to gods with Greek names and Egyptian faces, blended gently into one another, as though the city itself were learning to hold more than a single truth at once. And down by the water, the old fishermen still mended their nets, as their fathers had before them. But now, great ships from distant lands rode at anchor just beyond them, sails furled, holds full of far-off wonders. The old quiet life and the new wide world, side by side, on the same warm and golden shore. And the city grew quickly, faster perhaps than any city before it. People came from everywhere, Greeks and Egyptians, Jews and Syrians, sailors and merchants and scholars and dreamers, all drawn to this new place at the edge of the world where everything seemed possible. Within a single lifetime, it had become one of the largest cities on earth. For Alexander was gone now, dead in a distant land, and his great empire did not stay whole. His generals divided his conquests among themselves, the way men divide an inheritance, with care and with quiet greed. And one of them, a careful, clever man, looked at all the riches he might have claimed, and chose Egypt. He chose this city, by the sea. And here we leave the empty shore that became a city, the grain eaten by birds, the harbor full of new ships. And we turn now toward the man who would take Alexander's city and give it something Alexander had never imagined. His name was Ptolemy. He had been one of Alexander's companions since they were boys together, a soldier, a friend, a steady hand in a world of restless and ambitious men. He was not the loudest of the generals, nor the most hungry for glory. He was something rarer. He was patient. And when the great empire was carved apart, he did not reach for the most land, or the most gold, or the most distant and glittering of conquests. He reached for Egypt, for the Nile and its endless harvests of grain, for the great new city by the sea. He took what he could hold, and hold well, and he let the others chase their wider dreams to ruin. And it is worth pausing on the strangeness of the idea. In that age, knowledge was a scattered thing. A scroll here, a teacher there, a single precious copy of a great work that might vanish in one careless fire. To learn, you had to travel, for years sometimes, from city to distant city, seeking out the few who held what you wished to know. What the Ptolemies imagined was to end all that wandering, to bring it all to one place and keep it together, so that a single person, in a single lifetime, might stand at the very edge of everything that was known. It was not only a library they were building, it was a gathering of the scattered mind of the world into one quiet room beside the sea. And so they gave it the wealth of a kingdom and asked for almost nothing in return. No tax, no tribute, no army raised, only scrolls and the patient minds to read them. It was, in its way, among the most hopeful things a powerful person can do, to spend their gold not on walls or on war, but on understanding. To believe that a people are made greater not by what they conquer, but by what they slowly come to know. It is a belief the world is often forgotten and often remembered and never quite let die. He understood something the warriors around him did not. Armies fade, borders shift like sand, kings are forgotten almost as soon as they are buried, their names worn smooth from their own monuments. But ideas can outlast all of it. A thing written down and copied and kept can travel further than any army ever marched. It can cross seas the king never sailed and live in minds that will not be born for 1,000 years. And so Ptolemy began to dream of something strange and new and quiet. Not a fortress, not a great tomb for himself, heavy with gold, a house of knowledge, a place where the wisdom of every people, in every language, might be gathered together under one roof and kept safe and read and added to forever. It had never quite been done before, not like this. There had been collections of books here and there, a few hundred scrolls kept in a temple, a wealthy scholar's private shelves. But no one had ever tried to gather everything, to hold the whole mind of the world in a single place. It was an idea almost too large to say aloud, the kind of idea that sounds, at first, like madness, and only later, much later, like wisdom. They say a wise man helped him shape it. An exile from Athens, learned in the ways of the great Greek schools, who came to Alexandria and whispered the plan into being. Build a house for the Muses, he is said to have advised, the 9 goddesses of learning and music and song. Gather the books from every shore, bring the finest minds and care for them, and pay them to do nothing in all their days but think. And Ptolemy did. He had the means for it. He had the wealth of all Egypt behind him, the old gold of the pharaohs, the grain of the great river, the trade of 100 harbors flowing in. He could afford to be generous on a scale the world had rarely seen. And in this, at least, he was. He did not live to finish it. Like Alexander before him, he laid the foundation and left the rest to another. But his son carried the dream onward, and his son, it seems, loved it even more than he had. This second Ptolemy, whom they called Philadelphus, poured his whole heart into the library. Under him, it grew from an idea into a wonder. The shelves filled, the halls rose, the scholars came. Imagine being one of them. A scholar arriving by ship after a long and weary voyage, stepping down onto the harbor stones, dusty and salt-stained and tired, and being told, "Here you will have rooms of your own. Here you will have meals and gardens to walk in, and other fine minds to argue with late into the night. And here, all around you, more books than you have ever seen in your life. More books, perhaps, than you ever knew existed in the whole wide world. For a person who loved to learn, it must have felt like a kind of paradise. A quiet city of the mind, set down gently beside a warm and shining sea. The lamps burning late into the night, the soft rustle of papyrus unrolling, the low murmur of a dozen languages drifting through the cool of the colonnades. The dream of the Ptolemies was becoming real, stone by stone, scroll by scroll, mind by patient mind, a house to hold the whole world's knowing. And consider what it asked of them, this dream. A king might raise an army in a season, or a temple in a few short years. But to gather the knowledge of the whole world, that was the work of generations. It would never truly be finished. There would always be one more scroll, in one more language, on one more distant shore. And yet they began it anyway, knowing they would not see it done. They planted a thing whose shade they would never sit in. There is a quiet kind of greatness in that, to build patiently for a future you will not live to see, to trust that those who come after will carry the work a little further and then hand it gently on again. And here we leave the kings and their patient dream, the exile's whisper and the son who loved it best. And we turn now toward the place itself, to step inside, out of the bright sun, and see what they had built. Come inside with me now. Out of the bright harbor light, with its glare off the white stone and the water, and into the cool, deep shade of the great house itself. They called it the Mouseion, the place of the muses. It is where our own word, museum, was first born, though it was something gentler and stranger, and far more alive than the museums we know today. It was not really a single building. It was more like a small world of its own, set within the royal quarter of the city, close to the palace and close to the sea. Halls and gardens, walkways and courtyards, lecture rooms and dining rooms, all woven together into one quiet whole. A place to live and to eat and to walk, and above all else, a place to think. Imagine walking slowly through it. Long colonnades of smooth, pale columns, their shadows falling in soft bars across the cool stone floor. The air still and shaded, carrying the faint green smell of the gardens and the salt of the sea beyond. And somewhere, always, the sound of water moving, a fountain, a channel, the slow and gentle trickle that the dry heat of Egypt makes so very precious. And everywhere there was light and the careful management of light. For a library is, in the end, a quiet quarrel between two enemies, the need to see and the danger of flame. The scrolls were precious beyond measure, and dry and fragile, and a single overturned lamp could undo 100 years of patient gathering in a single hour. So the lamps were kept low and set far back and tended with great care. The real work was done by daylight, in the long bright hours, by readers who turned their scrolls to catch the sun. And when the dark came down, the great house grew quiet and rested and waited for the morning to read again. And people lived their whole lives here, some of them. They arrived as young students and grew old among the scrolls, and were buried, at last, in the city they had given their days to. Their names are mostly gone now, like the names of the scribes and the gardeners and the keepers of the lamps. But the place held them, gently, for as long as they lived, fed them, sheltered them, and asked of them only that they love the work. There are worse ways to spend a life than that. Quietly, among books, beside the sea. There were covered walkways where the scholars strolled as they argued, pacing slowly back and forth in the shade, hands moving as they spoke. There was a great dining hall where they ate together at the king's own expense, sharing their meals and their ideas in the very same breath. A thought begun over bread and finished, perhaps, only hours later, by lamplight. And there were rooms for study, quiet and dim and private, where a single person could sit alone with a single scroll for a whole long afternoon and disturb no one and be disturbed by nothing. And there were the gardens, shaded gardens with winding paths to wander and worn benches to sit on, and the soft, ceaseless movement of leaves overhead. Imagine the warmth of the late sun coming low and gold through the trees, the hush of a place where the only labor asked of you is thought. A scholar sitting quite still on a bench, eyes half closed, turning some difficult question over and over in the mind, while the light slowly changes around them and the day softly ends. The people who lived here were cared for completely. They paid no rent. They worked no other trade, kept no shop, tilled no field. They were given everything they could need, so that nothing in the ordinary world would ever pull them away from their books. In return, they were asked only to learn and to teach, and to add what little they could to the great and growing gathering of human knowledge. It is a tender idea when you lie still and truly sit with it. A whole house built on the simple belief that thinking itself was worth paying for, that a mind left in peace with good books and good company and good food and time would, in the end, make something the whole world could one day use. We do not always believe that in our own age. They believed it here. And near the Mouseion, or perhaps woven right through it, for the old records are soft on this, and so much has been lost, stood the library proper. The shelves themselves, row upon row upon row of small wooden compartments, each one cradling its rolled scrolls of papyrus, the way a honeycomb holds its cells. Imagine the look of it, the warm brown of cedar wood, oiled and dark, the pale creamy rolls of papyrus, each one with a small tag hanging from its end, naming the work and its author in faded ink. And the smell, dry reed and old dust, and the faint sweet scent of the cedar oil they use to keep the worms and the rot away. The light falling through high windows in long, slow beams, thick with golden dust. And after dark, the soft gold of the oil lamps, set carefully far back from the precious scrolls, throwing their gentle glow along the shelves. And imagine the sounds of it, late in the day. The soft scratch of a reed pen on papyrus, the dry whisper of a scroll being unrolled, and then, slowly, rolled again. The low murmur of two scholars in some far corner, lost in talk. Footsteps, unhurried, on the cool stone. A door, somewhere, easing shut. And beneath it all, always, the faint and distant sound of the sea, breathing against the harbor walls, the way it had long before the city, and the way it would long after. A person could sit here, in the gathering dusk, and feel held by something far larger than themselves, surrounded by the patient voices of the dead and the quiet company of the living, all bent toward the same gentle task, to understand and to remember. This was the heart of it, a quiet house full of the slow and patient work of remembering. And here we leave the cool halls and the shaded gardens, the honeycomb shelves and the lamplight on the cedar, and we turn now toward the great hunt that filled them, the long, strange, tireless gathering of the scrolls. To fill such a library, you must first find the books, and the kings of Alexandria wanted all of them. Not a few, not only the famous ones, all of them. Every scroll, in every language, from every shore that a ship could reach. It was a hunger, almost, a gentle, endless, patient hunger to gather and to keep and to gather still more. And they pursued it with the full and heavy wealth of Egypt behind them, and with a cleverness that is, even now, even after all these centuries, just a little astonishing. They sent their agents out across the whole of the known world. Buyers with full purses, traveling from market to market and from city to city, seeking out scrolls to purchase or to borrow or to copy. Wherever books were bought and sold, the men of Alexandria were said to be there, paying well, and always asking for more. And the scrolls themselves were a kind of marvel. They were made of papyrus, the tall river reed of Egypt, split and pressed and dried into long pale sheets, then glued end to end and wound around a slender wooden rod. A single long work might run to many rolls, each kept in its own little nook, each with its small hanging tag. To read was to unroll with one hand and gather up with the other, the words passing slowly between your palms, one column at a time. There was no hurrying it. A book in those days moved only at the speed of a calm and patient hand. And so each scroll was, in a sense, unrepeatable. There were no presses, no machines, no way to make 1,000 copies in an afternoon. Every single copy was the work of a human hand over many days, which meant that every scroll carried, faintly, the trace of the one who had made it, the careful loops of the letters, a small note in the margin, a slip corrected and corrected again. To gather so many of them in one place was to gather the patient labor of thousands of hands across hundreds of years, a quiet monument built not of stone, but of ink and time and care. And they had a particular rule for ships. The story goes that any vessel that put into the great harbor of Alexandria was searched, not for smuggled goods or weapons or gold, but for books. Any scroll found aboard, no matter whose it was carried up at once to the library. There, the patient scribes would copy it out, word for careful word. And then, this is the part that lingers in the mind, they would keep the original and give the ship's owner the copy. The original scrolls went onto the shelves, each one marked with a quiet little note. From the ships. The fresh copies sailed away over the horizon. One imagines the merchants did not always mind so very much. A clean new copy, in clear bright ink, in exchange for some worn and fraying old roll. But the library always kept the older text, the truer one, the one closer to the author's own living hand. They understood that a copy of a copy drifts slowly away from the truth, and they wanted to hold the truth. There is another story, softer and stranger still. The great old city of Athens held the official scrolls of its 3 most famous playwrights, the master texts kept as a sacred treasure and never, ever to be lent out. But Alexandria asked to borrow them, only to copy them they promised, and quickly. And to show their good faith, they left behind an enormous sum of gold, a true fortune, as a deposit, to guarantee the safe return of the precious scrolls. and then Alexandria kept the originals. They sent back to Athens only beautiful, perfect copies, and let the great deposit of gold be forfeit. They surrendered a fortune without a second thought, simply to hold the truer text. It was, perhaps, not entirely honest, a small and gentle theft dressed up in fine manners, but it tells you, more than any number could, how deeply, how fiercely they cared. And it was not only Greek books that they wanted. They sought out the wisdom of every people under the sun, the temple records of Egypt itself, older than the Greeks could even imagine, the sacred and ancient texts of distant eastern lands, carried in by travelers and translated slowly with great and loving labor. Astronomy from the watchers of the eastern skies, medicine and mathematics and poetry and law and the quiet recorded dreams of 100 different peoples. Imagine the scrolls arriving, day after day, year after year, decade after decade. Carried up from the harbor in baskets and in wooden chests, unrolled and read and sorted and copied and carefully shelved. A slow and steady river of words flowing into the great house from every direction the wind could blow. How many there were, in the end, no one truly knows. The old accounts speak of hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Some say 400,000. Some say far, far more. The numbers are uncertain now, blurred by the long centuries and by the pride of those who first wrote them down. But whatever the true count, it was more knowledge gathered into one single place than the world had ever seen before, or would see again for a very long time. And think, for a moment, of the patience in it all. Not the kings, and not the clever schemes, but the quiet hands that did the work, the scribes who sat day after day, copying long texts letter by letter, by the light of a small lamp. The readers who checked each copy against the original, hunting for the single slipped word, the small mistake that might, over centuries, grow into a lie. The ones who mended the torn scrolls and re-rolled the loose ones and brushed the dust away and kept the worms at bay. A library is not built once in a burst of glory. It is kept, gently, every single day, by people whose names we will never know. People who simply believed that the words were worth the saving. And here we leave the searched ships and the borrowed scrolls, the small gentle theft and the slow river of words, and we turn now toward the people who sat among them, and what their quiet minds achieved. A library is more than its shelves. It is more than its scrolls and its catalogs and its cool stone rooms. In the end, a library is the minds that come to read it. And to Alexandria came some of the finest minds the ancient world would ever know. Quiet people mostly. People who loved a difficult problem the way that others love a song, or a face, or the sea. There was a man named Eratosthenes who kept the library for many years. He was curious about nearly everything, geography and poetry and mathematics and the slow wheeling of the stars. His friends, they say, gave him a teasing nickname because he was second best in so many fields at once and never quite first in any. But he did one thing, with nothing but a stick and a shadow and his own patient mind, that no teasing could ever touch. He measured the size of the whole earth. He had heard that far to the south, in a distant city, on a certain day at noon, the sun shone straight down into a deep well and cast no shadow at all, its light reaching all the way to the water at the bottom. But in Alexandria, on that very same day, at that very same hour, a simple stick set upright in the ground did cast a shadow, short and clear. And from that, from the length of one small shadow and the known distance between two cities, he reasoned out the curve of the entire world. He sat with the numbers, quietly, and worked them through, and his answer was remarkably close to the truth, closer, in fact, than anyone else would manage for well over 1,000 years afterward. A man sitting still in a library, by the sea, working out the size of the whole round planet, from a shadow on the ground. And what stays with you, looking back, is how ordinary their tools were. A stick, a shadow, a length of string, a clear night, and an open mind. They had no machines to do their thinking for them, no glass to bring the far heavens close. They had only careful watching and patient reasoning, and the willingness to be surprised by what they found. And with those few simple things, they reached out and touched the size of the earth and the order of the wheeling stars, a quiet reminder of how far a calm mind can travel with almost nothing at all in its hands. Imagine the deep calm of that. No instruments of glass or steel, no machines, just careful thought and patience and the simple willingness to wonder. The world is round. It is this large, and I can know it, from here, at my desk, with a shadow and a length of string. There is a kind of quiet courage in that, and a kind of deep peace, too. And there were others, so many others. There was a geometer named Euclid, who is said to have worked here in Alexandria, and who wrote a book about the shapes of things, points and lines and circles and angles, built up one clear step at a time. That single book would be studied and copied and taught for more than 2,000 years. Children still learn from his ideas today, in classrooms he could never have dreamed of, though few of them will ever know his name. There was an astronomer named Aristarchus who looked up at the night sky and dared to think the unthinkable. Perhaps, he said very quietly, the earth is not the still center of all things. Perhaps it is the sun that stands at the center and holds its place, and the earth that moves around it, turning as it goes. He was right. He was simply right, and the world would not quite believe him for nearly 2,000 more years. His true thought waited, patient and sleeping, in a few copied lines. There were physicians who studied the human body with new and careful and gentle eyes. There were poets who polished their slender verses to a soft and lasting shine. There were map makers, charting coastlines no one in the city had ever seen, and engineers dreaming of machines of water and of air. All of them gathered here in this one quiet place, sharing their meals and their arguments and their long evening walks under the same long roof. And there was a poet named Callimachus who took on a task almost as vast as the library itself. For how do you find a single scroll among hundreds of thousands? How do you even know, truly, what it is that you have? A treasure you cannot find is hardly a treasure at all. So he made a catalog, a vast and careful listing of all the works in the library, sorted by subject and by author, with a small note on each. It ran, they say, to many scrolls all on its own, a library of the library, a map of the whole gathered mind. It was, in its quiet way, the first great catalogue in the world, the distant grandparent of every index, every card drawer, every search that has ever come since. Imagine all of them on a single evening, the day's heat slowly fading, the lamps lit one by one. A geometer and an astronomer walking together in the dim garden, talking softly about the shape of the heavens. A poet bent over his endless catalogue, adding one more patient line. The whole house humming very quietly with the work of trying to understand the world. And it was not all triumph, of course. Most of their days were slow and patient and quiet. A thought chased and lost and chased again. A calculation done and checked and found wanting and begun once more. They argued gently and sometimes not so gently. They were wrong, often, about a great many things. They guessed and wondered and waited, and sometimes simply sat in the garden, watching the light, with no answer coming at all. But that, too, is how knowledge is made, not in sudden flashes, but in the long, soft, unglamorous hours, the willingness to sit with a question and not to look away, to care about the truth of a small thing, for its own sake, with no reward but the knowing. They had the rarest gift of all, time and quiet and permission to think, and they used it as well as almost anyone ever has. And here we leave the scholars at their lamps, the shadow that measured the earth, and the catalogue that mapped the mind, and we turn now toward the sheer, vast scale of all that they had gathered. Let us pause now and simply imagine all of it at once. The full, quiet weight of everything that stood within those walls. Hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Shelf after shelf, room after room, the honeycomb cells stretching away into the soft and dusty dim. And every single one of them, a voice. Everyone a person who had once sat down, somewhere, in some far city or some long-gone year, and tried to set their knowing into words, so that it would not be lost when they were gone. There were the great poems, of course, the old songs of gods and heroes that the Greeks had loved and recited for centuries. But there was so very much more than that. Histories of peoples now entirely forgotten, their kings and their wars surviving only here, in ink, maps of coastlines that no living sailor had visited in generations. There were books of medicine, how to set a broken bone, how to ease a fever, which plants might heal and which might quietly harm. There were books of mathematics and of the slow and certain movements of the stars, books of law and of farming and of how to raise a wall or a temple or a ship, plays to make you weep, and love poems, and the gentle philosophies of how a person ought to live and how to meet the end of living. Think of the labor held in that one quiet place. 10,000 lifetimes of patient human thought, rolled up and shelved and waiting in the cool and the dark to be unrolled again. A person could walk in from the bright street and reach up and take down into their own two hands the very mind of someone who had died 300 years before they were born. The dead, still speaking, softly, to anyone who cared to listen. And think of how a single scroll might travel to reach those shelves. A poem composed in some small city generations before, spoken first aloud, then set down by a careful hand, copied by a student and carried across the sea, bought perhaps in a dusty market by an agent of the king, carried up from the harbor, unrolled, read, copied once more, and laid at last into its small wooden nook among hundreds of thousands of others. Every scroll on those shelves had its own long journey behind it, its own chain of hands reaching back through the years, each one a small miracle of survival, to have come so far and lasted so long and arrived at last in this quiet and careful place. And the wonder of it is not only the scale, but the variety. Side by side on those shelves sat the practical and the dreaming, a treatise on the tides, beside a hymn to a forgotten god, a surgeon's careful notes, beside a comedy meant to make a whole city laugh. The whole range of what it is to be human, gathered without judgment and kept all together, the serious and the silly, the proven and the merely hoped for. For they did not yet know which scrolls would matter most, so they tried, gently, to keep them all. And to keep it all in some kind of order, there was the great catalogue, the long work of Callimachus, and of those who came patiently after him. A reader could arrive with a single question and be guided gently to the answer. Yes, we have something on that, on this shelf, in this hand, written perhaps by a man you have never heard of, in a city now fallen to dust. A whole quiet system of finding, built with great care, so that no scroll would ever be lost in the sheer overwhelming abundance of scrolls. Imagine the smell of that vast collection. Dry papyrus, faintly sweet, cedar oil, dark and resinous, guarding against the worms and the slow rot of the damp, the cool stone underfoot, the still and waiting air, the dust that turned to drifting gold in every long beam of afternoon light. And here is the quiet ache of it, the thing that lies always just beneath the wonder. So much of what those shelves once held, we no longer have, not a word of it. We know the names of works that are entirely gone, plays we can never read, histories we can never check, whole books of poets that we know now only by a single surviving line, quoted once by someone else and otherwise lost forever. Whole worlds of knowing named in those old catalogues and nowhere else on earth. Titles without their texts, authors without their words, like walking through a great gallery and seeing only the empty frames where the paintings used to hang, the labels still there, the art long gone. What was kept and what was lost, what still speaks and what has fallen silent. For a time, a long, golden, gentle time, almost all of it was here, safe, together, under one roof, beside the warm and shining sea. But nothing golden stays golden forever. Lie here a moment longer and picture it whole, one last time. The great house in its prime, on an ordinary evening. The lamps just lit. A reader, somewhere deep in the stacks, lowering a scroll and rubbing tired eyes, having just learned something no one in their village would ever know. A young scholar, newly arrived, standing quite still in a doorway, simply staring at the endless shelves, hardly able to believe that such a place could be real. The cedar, the dust, the gold of the light. Hundreds of thousands of voices waiting patiently in the dark to be heard again. For this little while, nothing is lost. Everything is here. Everything is safe. Hold that picture gently, as it was, before the long evening comes. And here we leave the full shelves at the very height of their glory, the cedar oil, the drifting dust, the 10,000 lifetimes of thought, and we turn now, slowly, gently, toward the long evening and the slow fading of the light. We often imagine the library ending in a single great fire. One terrible night of flames against the black sky. All that gathered knowledge, all those hundreds of thousands of voices, turning to ash and smoke and drifting embers, all at once. It is a powerful picture. It is the picture we keep. But the truth, as far as we can tell, was slower than that, and sadder, and far more quiet. It is strange, perhaps, that we should want a single dramatic ending. A villain, a fire, one terrible night to point to and to mourn. Maybe it is easier that way, easier than the truth, which is that great things can simply be neglected into nothing, that no one need destroy them, that they can be lost slowly through 1,000 small failures to care. The library asks something gentler and harder of us. It asks us to understand that what is precious must be tended again and again, or it slips away, not in flames, but in silence, in forgetting, in the quiet turning away of busy people with other things to do. And the city itself was changing all the while. The bright young place that had drawn the whole world to its harbor grew older and wearier and more troubled, as all cities do. Power passed from gentle hands to harder ones. The long, generous peace that had let scholars sit and think gave way to anxious years when survival mattered more than understanding. And a library is a luxury of peace. It is the gift a people give themselves when they are safe enough to look beyond the next day. When that safety fades, the lamps, one by one, go dark. The library did not fall in a night. It faded over many lifetimes, the way a lamp fades very gradually as its oil runs low, the light shrinking back, dimming and dimming, until at last, almost unnoticed, it is simply out. No single hand put it out. No one villain, no one fire, no one terrible day. Many small losses, across many long and ordinary years, did all the patient work instead. There was a fire once, that much is true. Long ago, when a Roman general brought his war into the streets of the city, flames spread along the crowded harbor, and some of the scrolls were lost to them. How many, we do not know. Perhaps a great many, or perhaps mostly scrolls stored down by the docks, awaiting export, rather than the deep heart of the collection itself. The old accounts disagree with one another, and they always have. The smoke of that one day still hangs, even now, over the whole story. But the library went on after that fire. Scholars still came and still worked at their desks. Scrolls were still copied and still kept and still read by lamplight. The wound was real and it was deep, but it was not the end. The end came differently and more gently and far more slowly. The true decline was the quiet one, the one that is so much harder to see and harder to mourn. The kings who had once loved the library so very fiercely were gone now, and the rulers who came after them loved it less and then less again. The generous payments grew thin and then thinner. The warm invitations stopped being sent, and one by one, quietly, the scholars began to drift away to other cities, to other patrons, to other shores, and they took their knowledge with them when they went. There were troubled years for the city too. Unrest and war, and the slow and grinding shifting of power from one hand to another, and then to another after that. And in hard times, a house of books is a fragile thing. It is so easily forgotten. No one needs to burn it. No one needs to hate it. They need only stop caring for it. They need only have other, more urgent worries, and that, in the end, is enough. And papyrus does not last. This is the quiet truth beneath it all. Left in the damp, it rots and softens and falls to pieces. Left in the dry, it grows brittle and yellow and crumbles into flakes at the lightest touch. A scroll must be copied again and again, generation after generation, hand after patient hand, or it slowly, surely, turns to dust. The library was not only a place to keep books, it was a place to keep on copying them. And when there is no one left to do the copying, the books begin, very quietly, to die. And so the great collection thinned, not in a blaze, but in a long, soft, gradual silence. A scroll lost here, a whole roomful neglected there, behind a door no one opened anymore, a scholar who left, and was simply never replaced, a copy that should have been made and was not, and so a voice that fell silent forever. The honeycomb shelves, slowly, year by year, decade by decade, emptying. And by the time the long centuries had finished their patient work, the library that had once tried to hold the entire mind of the world was simply, quietly, gone. Not destroyed in a single dramatic moment, but worn away, the way a coastline is worn away by the soft and tireless sea. No one can even tell us the year that it truly ended. It faded so very slowly that no one thought to write down the day. And perhaps that is the gentlest way to understand it. Not a death, but a long falling asleep. The library closing its eyes, slowly, over centuries, the way a person drifts toward rest at the end of a very long day. The lamps lowered, one by one, the readers gone home, the rooms growing quiet, and then quieter still. No alarm, no struggle, only a deep and gradual stillness settling over everything that had once been so alive. There is sorrow in it, yes, but there is peace in it too. All things that are made must one day be unmade, even the greatest of them, even the most beloved. And there is a kind of mercy in a slow and quiet ending, a fading soft enough that no one even marks the hour. And here we leave the long evening, the thinning shelves, the drifting scholars, the unwritten ending. And we turn now, softly, toward what it all might mean for us, lying here, so many quiet centuries on. What was lost, in the end, when the great library faded? Not the building. Stone is only stone, and all buildings fall, given time enough. What was lost was the knowing, the words themselves. The patient thought of thousands upon thousands of minds, gathered together with such love and such care over so many years, and then, slowly, let go of, and let slip away. We will never read most of it. The plays that once made whole audiences weep, in theaters now silent, the histories of kingdoms now reduced to nothing but a name, or not even that. The maps, the cures, the careful calculations of the stars. Somewhere in all those vanished scrolls were surely answers to questions that we are still, even now, in all our cleverness, asking ourselves today. And yet, consider how much did come down to us against all the odds. The poems we still read, the plays still performed, on stages the ancient world could never have dreamed. The ideas, copied and copied again, surviving war and flood and the slow rot of the years, passing from failing hand to fresh young hand, all the long way down to ours. When you hold an old book now, you are holding the far end of one of those long chains, a thread of care, unbroken, reaching back across 2,000 years to a scribe at his lamp in a city by the sea. Nothing that is truly loved is ever wholly lost. Some of it always survives, carried forward by those who could not bear to let it go. And in a way, that is the truest monument to Alexandria. Not a building, restored, not a ruin, marked with a small bronze sign, but the simple, stubborn habit of saving things, of writing them down and copying them out and handing them on. The habit the library taught the world, and the world never quite unlearned. Every time someone saves a story from being forgotten, the library lives again a little. It is less a place now than a promise we keep making to one another across the centuries, that what is known and loved will not be allowed to vanish without a fight. It is tempting to grieve it, to lie here and wonder how much further we might have come as a people had it all somehow survived. How many lost lifetimes of progress, of discovery, of quiet understanding sank away into the dust of Alexandria and were gone. It is a real sorrow. It is allowed to be a sorrow. But lie with it just a little longer, here in the warm dark, and a softer thought will arrive. Because not all of it was lost, not the best of it. The greatest ideas, it turns out, had a quiet way of escaping. Copied and carried off in a traveler's bag. Copied again in some distant city. Spreading, slowly, from hand to hand, from shelf to shelf, from mind to mind, faster, in the end, than any fire could ever chase them. The measurement of the earth survived. The clean, clear geometry survived and is taught to children still. The strange, brave idea that the earth might move around the sun, that survived too, sleeping quietly in a few copied lines, waiting through the long centuries for a later age to wake it and to believe it at last. The library gave these things to the world before it faded. It set them loose, and the world, for all its troubles, kept them. That was always the deepest dream, in a way. Not to lock the knowledge up and hoard it and guard it behind walls, but to gather it and copy it and send it back out, everywhere, into the world. To make the mind of humankind too widespread, too well-rooted, ever to fully die. The building is gone, but the idea of it, the idea that knowledge should be gathered and kept and freely shared, that idea never left us. It is here, even now, even tonight. Every library that has come since is, in a quiet way, its child. every shelf of books in every small town, every catalog, every reading room lit late into the evening, every place where a person can simply walk in and reach up and hold another mind in their hands. The Library of Alexandria is gone, and yet, in this way, it is everywhere. It never really ended. It only scattered, like seeds on the wind. Stone remembers. Sand forgets. The walls are dust now, lost somewhere beneath a living, modern city by that same old sea. But the longing that first built them, the simple human wish to understand, and to keep what we understand, and to pass it gently on, that is older than the library. It outlived the library, and it lives in you still tonight. And the past, dear listeners, is complete. It is finished. It is safe. It cannot be undone, and it cannot harm you. The kings have made their choices long ago. The scholars have set down their pens. The scrolls have all been written and read and gently let go. There is nothing left for you to do here in this old and quiet place, but rest. So let the sorrow soften now into something gentler. The library tried to hold everything and could not. No one can. That was never really the lesson of it. The lesson is quieter and kinder. It is that people have always longed to understand and to remember and to pass what they have learned into hands they will never hold. That longing built a wonder by the sea 2,000 years ago. And that same longing is in you now, even as you drift toward sleep, in every book you have ever loved, everything you have ever wished to keep. The library is gone, and yet nothing truly good was wasted. It was given to the world, and the world carried it onward, all the long way down the years, to you. And here we leave the lost scrolls, and the ideas that escaped them, the dust of the walls, and the longing that outlived them. And we turn now, slowly, gently, toward sleep. The lamps are low now. Imagine them, one by one, being carefully, gently put out. The small flames pinched into darkness, the long halls falling soft and dim and quiet, the shelves settling slowly into shadow. Outside, the harbor is still. The ships rest at their moorings, rocking very softly. The dark water moves slow and gentle against the worn stone of the quay. And far out, at the tip of the island, the great lighthouse keeps its single, patient, golden flame, watching over the sleeping sea. The whole city breathes and quietens and sleeps. You do not need to hold on to any of it. Not the names, not the dates, not the long and gentle story of what was kept and what was lost. Let it all drift softly away from you now, like scrolls carried out, weightless, on a calm and outgoing tide. There is nothing to remember, nothing to finish, nothing left undone. The library has waited, in its quiet way, for 2,000 years. It can wait a little longer still, while you rest. It will be there, in the morning, in all the books and all the quiet rooms of the world, when you wake. Let your breathing slow. Let the warmth of the bed hold you all the way down. Let the words become a dream, and the dream become the dark, soft and deep and kind. They will be there when you wake. There is nowhere you need to be. No path to follow, no ending to reach. Only this, the warmth of the bed, the slow rise and fall of your own breath, the soft dark gathering around you like a blanket. The city sleeps. The harbor sleeps. The long shelves rest in their shadow, and the sea breathes on, patient and endless, far away. Let yourself go down to meet it, down past the names, past the years, past the last of the day's small worries, down into something deep and quiet and kind. 2,000 years ago, in a city by the sea, people lit their lamps against the dark and gathered what they loved and tried to keep it safe through the night. Tonight, you are doing something a little like that too. Gathering yourself in, letting the day's small troubles settle, keeping yourself safe and warm until the morning. There is nothing more you need to do. The lamps are out. The harbor is still. The long shelves rest in the dark. They will be there when you wake. Sleep well, dear listeners. Sleep well.